Wow! What is the weirdest looking chameleon you can think of? The Jackson's chameleon? Panther chameleon? The AI generated chameleon? Oh, shit, yeah, that's a weird one. That wasn't what I was thinking of, though. I'd probably have to say that by far the weirdest guy I know in the Chameleonidae family has got to be the Namaqua chameleon. Not because he has any, fancy stuff going on with him, but more the fact that he's, 1, terrestrial, and 2, a desert-dwelling guy. Yes, a chameleon, aka the lizards that literally drop dead if the humidity is too low, if it's too high, or if you even just look at them funny. Imagine one of those in one of the toughest to surviving climates on Earth. Emphasis on one of course. Hey, welcome to Herp Corner, the series where we delve into the ins and outs of some of the more exceptionally weird species of reptiles and amphibians. I'm today's host, Ozzy, and without further ado, the Namaqua chameleon, or Chameleon namaquensis. Now, if any of you guys out there are chameleon keepers, you might be asking, what on earth did this guy evolve to withstand a place so dry? Good question. So, a few things. Right off the bat, if you look at a pic of this dude, what's the first thing you notice? Well, for one, got a much shorter tail than normal. Like, usually with chameleons, their tail is twice as big as their body. That's mostly because the little greenies need a long tail, since they make great use of its prehensility. Prehensility is when something is able to grab and wrap around stuff, by the way. It's really useful when you're an arboreal critter, because it can prevent you from falling, it can help with balance, or some other thing you might need. I mean, imagine how much functionality you'd get with a third arm, especially living in the trees. It's kind of like that, but my question is, why did the Namaqua chameleons evolve to lose it? By the way, that little thing is called evolutionary regression. Fun fact. Other than the fact that it's a little useless to have a prehensile tail when you're terrestrial, the main downside of prehensile tails in this context would be its effect on balance. See, if you're a little guy, a little guy who's shaped like a big fat flounder with legs, by the way, if I might add, and you're walking around with this big thing behind you, and that thing has nothing to do but swing around, then it's probably going to knock you over, or get caught on something, or it's going to collect mites, or slow you down, and you'll get eaten by some bird of prey that sees, a little guy stumbling around. So with this in mind, it's very easy to see why someone like the Namaqua chameleon would evolve to lose this disadvantage somewhere down the line. I will note, however, that Namaqua chameleons are not predated upon by any species other than large snakes. Additionally, the greatest threat posed to them would be accidental consumption of their own young. If prey animals are too close to a baby chameleon, like a fly or a grub, they'll often eat the baby as well by mistake. Funnily enough, or maybe not funnily enough, despite this, they're quite protective of their young around other species. During a study of the Namaqua chameleon, C. dilepus ate one of the Namaqua babies, which allegedly, and I quote, caused some upset among the adults. What that means specifically, I have no idea. Anyways, as I was saying, something else that makes a key difference between this guy and the greenies we're used to is their colors. People know chameleons for being vibrant and, changing colors, but these dudes don't really tend to do that much. Usually, you'll find a Namaqua chameleon as some shade of gray or brown or even black, because, well, they really don't need to be that extravagant to blend in with their surroundings. Well, I mean, okay, wait a second. This is controversy territory. I'm about to get controversial. Why do chameleons change color? Some people say it's to match their surroundings, which is false. This is easily debunked with the facts that chameleons in their natural resting state blend in with their surroundings better than changing into silly colors would. Not to mention, if a greenie was really in danger, he could literally run 21 miles per hour. The consensus among fans of little green guys is that they change color for purposes of thermoregulation, since most, if not all, chameleons are cold-blooded, so they need to change to something darker to absorb more sunlight. Another cool reason for color changing is that their bodily colors actually hold coded messages for each other, the details of which vary from species to species. At this current moment, our understanding of this and big air quotes, language, is really, really limited. So I can't exactly give you some kind of alphabet of what color represents or anything like that, but as we know, here's a mood chart for chameleons. Well, specifically veiled chameleons. It's a little limited, but it's pretty hard to measure the communication of a species that communicates almost entirely through color, when we don't even have access to the same color spectrum as they do. There are colors that they can change to that signify basic things such as danger, disease, mood, sexual consent. Likewise, if Namaqua chameleons are in the middle of courtship, they adopt a higher contrast spotted pattern. Well, at least the female does, in order to signal that she is in the middle of ovulation. So, communication is obviously a huge part of why they change color. But how come the Namaqua chameleon rarely does? Well, I'd hazard to guess it's for two main reasons. The first would be that thermoregulation takes a higher priority over interspecies communication. When you're native to a huge area that's either way too hot or way too cold, you're going to focus a lot of your energy on being able to stay in the sweet spot, or as close to it as you can get. Not to mention, the deserts of Namibia, where they're native to, are fairly vast and empty. It would take you a long while to find more than a single Namaqua chameleon within the same square mile just because of how sparse their distribution is, despite the fact that their population numbers are in least concern, but that's besides the point. Because of that, when would they have the opportunity to evolve a language mostly used for communal purposes? And I say communal purposes, not because chameleons are generally communal. They're not. They're usually pretty territorial in captivity, and as far as we know of, this is consistent with their wild behavior as well. But their color language still plays a part in signaling their territorial status, in that it shows signs of danger and that you should probably walk away. This is helpful for the minimal encounters they do have with others of their species. Namaqua chameleons, however, have even sparser moments of interspecies communication, thereby making it completely obsolete, and further explaining their minimal use of such. Now, it's possible they have still retained this ability to communicate and just haven't demonstrated it in front of humans, but we don't really know right now, so I can't give you a definitive answer. But here's another thing you'd be hard-pressed to find out. These tiny little guys are actually really good at hunting, like scarily good. You'd be hard-pressed to find another reptile with this same level of accuracy and strategy. As with any good hunter, a Namaqua chameleon chooses a strategy depending on the species that they are hunting, which implies they have some kind of mental map of their local area's fauna, but that's a completely different topic. But that's pretty crazy though, because in my experience, reptiles tend to primarily target species that can fit in the criteria of anything that fits in their mouth, including potentially toxic prey at times. So to see a lizard not only be able to tell the difference between animals that are edible, but can also change the way they approach them when hunting is completely new to me. Like, say a Namaqua chameleon comes across a little man from the Hymenoptera family. So wasps, ants, bees, guys like that. The chameleon will then react accordingly. For this order specifically, they target the stinger before they target any of the rest of the body. They always bite off the stinger and completely disarm the little guys that they're trying to eat. For snakes or lizards, they tend to go for the head or for the throat before eating the rest, because typically the native snakes or lizards' only defense mechanisms are located in the head area. Not only do they hunt in a way that's a lot more cunning than I'd expect from a chameleon, but they're also omnivorous, which is just not a thing that chameleons usually are at all. Usually they're incredibly selective on what they allow anywhere near their mouth hole. I've seen little greenies that absolutely hate insects that aren't locusts or waxworms. They're infamously very picky eaters. Namaqua chameleons, however, will even eat succulents. Well, specifically the fleshy parts of the succulents. Probably because that's the easiest part of the plant to fit in their little mouths, and also squash with their jaws. Remember, their teeth are very tiny, so, not best evolved for the purpose of ripping or tearing any flesh, albeit plant or animal. But an interesting tidbit about that would be that this is actually very different depending on which populations you're looking at. Wild populations of Namaqua chameleons tend to consume plant matter much more than their captive counterparts. This suggests their dietary flexibility is only a mechanism of survival rather than preference, or it could have to do with their consumption of gravel, which I will get into later. It seems to me that the species mostly ever consume plant matter if there is some scarcity in prey. Here's a fun fact. Wild populations, as a whole, have, on average, less than 29% of their diet be plant matter, but 30% of their diet is rocks. It's straight up gravel. They eat more rocks than they do vegetables. What the hell? The reason for why they eat rocks is inconclusive. Actually, guys that are closest to the seaside consume 30% rocks. The dudes that are more inland consume 6%. So, hold on a second. This is a huge gap, right? Here's the thing. The biggest theory as to why they eat rocks would be that they, kill a lot of internal parasites that way, during the process of digesting the rocks, I guess. There could be something about the gravel that they eat that just completely janks up any worms and things that they got in their bellies. With this in mind, there could be a much heavier presence of internal parasites in coastal populations rather than the guys more inland, therefore necessitating a much stronger need to consume gravel to, combat the parasites. It could also be linked to higher humidity by the ocean areas, making it much easier for parasites to spread and thrive, whether that's outside of the chameleon's body or inside. Or it could just be a larger volume of the parasite's babies being able to survive and propagate. Another thing on that note would be that coastal populations ingest more plant matter and more inorganic matter. Dudes who eat more plants also eat more rocks. This correlation could suggest that maybe they contract more parasites through the eating of plant matter. Zygophyllum is the specific species that they consume, the succulents. It's a type of succulent that is known to attract what are called mealybugs. They're these little bugs that infest a plant and suck it dry of all of its sap, and it shrivels up and it dies, basically. Any one of these little mealybugs that made the succulent his home tends to also attract soot mold, which attracts even more bugs of different varieties. Mealybugs very commonly attract their own species of ectoparasites, which are basically parasites for parasites. They make whatever plants they literally suck the life out of the breeding ground for more parasites. And just who eats the perfect breeding ground for parasites? The Namaqua Chameleon. The Namaqua Chameleon. Most commonly, the coastal populations of the Namaqua Chameleon. This makes it apparent, or at least to me, that the correlation for increased intake of inorganic matter is for the purpose of expelling the little guys hanging around in their gut that they got from eating the succulents. Also, fun fact, they eat 12 meals in one day, have an accelerated metabolic rate, which is very unusual for reptiles that are known to function solely in general. So, just had to mention that before we move on. Here's another thing. You know how desert animals typically have some kind of thing where they're able to store large volumes of water, since, deserts are generally super dry and water is kind of a crucial part of living. Well, that's still the case for Namaqua chameleons. They still heavily rely on water to survive, but in some strange twist of fate, they actually have rather lackluster methods of storing water. Their bladders are very small, and their guts are rarely ever used in storing water. It just kind of passes through them. With this in mind, it does seem that their conditions don't necessitate water storage as much as the conditions in other parts of the world do, like the Sahara Desert or Death Valley or other rigorously dry areas. Okay, but they have this cool mechanism that they use for drinking water, and basically it works like as soon as their skin anywhere on the body comes into contact with water, if it's like vapor or dewdrops or fog even, it transports through various channels along their epidermis and directly squirts it into their mouth, allowing them to drink from their skin without actually drinking from their skin, the same way like frogs and salamanders do. But the way they do this is before it reaches their mouths, it's actually filtered through a bunch of different chemicals that they produce themselves, which also applies to their urine. You know how astronauts have to filter their urine and turn it into drinkable water when they're in space? Well, Namaqua chameleons do the exact same thing, except it's through completely biological means, and also it's primarily inside their body, so the urine doesn't even have to leave before it gets filtered. But wait a second. Oh my god, hold on, I just realized something. The gravel and rocks and, the other weird inorganic material that they consume have high sodium content. The coastal populations consume more rocks. They consume more sodium. They likely consume more because the rocks around them have higher density in sodium because of their surrounding salt water. This sodium can then be used to filter water for drinking. So they might be eating gravel so they can use the sodium they digest from it to filter more water. What the hell? Okay. What the hell? Okay. This process is made 1,000,000 times easier with their salt glands, or sodium reserves, that are stationed on the sides of their jawline. This is what they use to filter all moisture into drinkable water. Some kind of goddamn astronauts that change color are native to the deserts in Namibia. I'm gonna lose it! Let's not lose it yet, though. If you need any more proof that these chameleons are secretly really sophisticated, then here's a little piece. Namaqua chameleons actually have large spaces as territory that they're protective of. And this isn't just like a judgment of little hiding spots that they this is like actual land that they actively survey and defend against. Defend against specifically others of their species. Female Namaqua chameleons specifically defend a little more than 200 square miles inland, whereas males tend to defend more than 1,000 square miles inland. I wouldn't expect them to have the body type to be walking around these big areas of land, but shows what I know about Namaqua chameleons. Just what we all know. What the hell? Territorial displays, specifically, are much more aggressive when they're female-on-female combat, whereas male territorial displays, although still leaving both individuals injured to some extent, are less often fatal. After mating, whichever party owns the land it takes place on tends to viciously shoo the other member out. When baby Namaqua chameleons are born, up until adulthood, they aren't actually seen as threats to territory, no matter the sex, and therefore are allowed space in said territory. They even sometimes exhibit communal behavior with one another, where they'll even go as far as sleeping together. Oh, what the hell? On the topic of sleeping together, it would be helpful to note that Namaqua chameleons actually burrow. They use their weird little grabbers to make little burrow systems and excavate pre-existing ones that were abandoned by rodents. Namaqua chameleons are documented in the IUCN Red List as least concern. Oh joy. Unfortunately, to all of you Mad Max Fury Road fans out there, I do have bad news. The filming of that movie was done in the Dorobe National Park, a key piece of land that the Namaqua chameleons are native to. This only momentarily hurt their population numbers, though, because they are still fine today. No thanks to Mr. Max from Mad Max, the Furious one on the road. I actually haven't seen that movie. Now that you're basically best friends with the Namaqua chameleon, it would be pertinent to know all the different things that they go by. And it's not a long list, as far as I know. They're most commonly known as the Namaqua chameleon, sometimes referred to as the Namaqua land chameleon, Chameleon namaquensis, and the desert chameleon. They're native to mostly Namibia and South Africa along the coastal regions and more inland sand areas. I love the Namaqua chameleon. They're just so funny and cool, and they're small as well. I hope you enjoy them just as much as I do, and if you don't, kindly reconsider. Fun fact, in the live-action adaptation of The Lion King in 2019, they replaced the Namaqua chameleon with a veiled chameleon. They're not even native to the same areas. Director Jon Favreau will one day pay for his crimes against humanity and against chameleons. Thank you for watching. If there are any reptiles or amphibians you'd like to see me cover, let me know, and I might. Don't ask when the next upload will be because, goodness gracious, they call me John doesn't upload for a while for a reason. Okay, bye.
That's why I love these jeans.